Hello, welcome back to the Art Channel. This week we are lucky to be at Tate Britain, where we're looking at David Hockney's retrospective exhibition, which spans 6 decades of work, ranging from early student work to Californian swimming pools and sunshine, to Yorkshire landscapes and recent iPad drawings.
We start looking at this portrait here of a model who is anonymous in the picture. But Grace, look how Hockney sets up the dialogue and relationship between himself working at a table behind the model in the foreground. And so ostensibly this prime subject here is the model reclining on the couch, while Hockney in the background inserts himself into the painting as the observer, the witness, the analyst of the subject.
It's a great take on a kind of eternal European subject, isn't it? To be looked at, the artist and the model. And he sets it up slightly differently, as you say. There's me here, there's the model, there's him in the background. So it's a very interesting kind of staged environment.
And of course we see this curtain that acts as a division in the middle ground of the painting. And this alludes to Hockney's fascination with the artificiality of painting, the way in which we perceive the composition, and he's making us aware that this is a construction, while at the same time we are immersed in this narrative here in the foreground.
This painting from 1961, tea painting in an illusionistic style, is a series of one of a series of works that he did, looking at obviously consumerism, looking at packaging, looking at kind of conflating imagery. You have this very strange, slightly off image of the Thai food tea, this kind of iconic British brand, with a figure transposed onto it. So it's a nod to abstraction, but it's rather kind of beautiful, I think, object.
It's like a trompe l'oeil, the way in which he creates the sort of depth and perspective of the box. And we've got this extraordinary, curious figure in the centre. So he's playing with scale, isn't he? It's like a sort of little Lilliputian figure who then appears to be steering the tea box as if it were a vehicle. So it's a series of jokes that at the same time alludes to current fashions in painting.
Yes, yeah.
And this is most overtly pop art work. Hockney resists this label, it's too reductive. But you can observe how he's connecting to the wider commercial world around him.
It's rather fun because if you look at the side of it, it doesn't work, I suppose, technically. And tea is spelled T-A-E, not T-E-A. So he's having fun with the whole thing.
Well, I think this was his mother's favourite brand of tea. And so there's that nice sort of emotional and nostalgic connection to his childhood.
A Bigger Splash from 1967 is really an iconic Hockney image. Iconic is an overused word, but this one really is. We all recognise it. And for me, it's definitely informed my idea of what California is. Of course it isn't, but this very much plays into this idea of social and sexual freedom, a place he emigrated to from rainy Yorkshire. And I love this cool minimalism. It's absolutely beautiful. And of course just the evidence of somebody going into the pool, but no figure.
Well, Hockney's work is so connected to his own life, his own biography, coming out, a search for sort of personal liberation, sexual freedom, escaping from rather dreary post-war Britain. And California is a fantasy. And in this painting, he's able to package that fantasy, making reference to Hollywood, the director's chair, the palm trees of Southern California, this sort of cool, elegant minimalism of this bungalow. And then, of course, we have the swimming pool, which is, for Hockney, so emblematic of this new lifestyle that is not available to him back home in the UK. And the way he makes the painting is very significant because he uses a fine brush to paint the splash very precisely, very delicately, and it becomes an ironic comment on the gestural qualities of abstract expressionism, that spontaneity. He's slowing down painting and not accelerating it.
And I think when we think of his experiments with photography, a painting like this makes perfect sense, moving from photography to painting and back again. And this really kind of defines him, doesn't it, in some way, these swimming pools. Of course, he's done lots more, but we know these so well. And I think you're right, the range of marks he uses to make that splash. He constantly battles or experiments with the way you paint water, as painters always have. Very, very difficult.
And finally, I should say that there is this strong sense of human activity, but it is not visible. This diver has jumped in and we're just a second behind. And so it's almost sort of cinematic in that way. There's a sense of drama, really, in the painting that's only alluded to. And we should compare it, of course, to this work, Peter getting out of Nick's pool, and you can see a young man naked coming out of this very stylized body of water. And Hockney, in this characteristic way, is always thinking about how, as an artist, he can translate and interpret the material world around him and find a kind of artistic expression for it. And that's part of the success of the paintings, I think.
He's very good at that visual shorthand, isn't he? Of course, this looks nothing like water, but it's redolent enough for me to think of those swimming pools of light on water. I think the way he made the painting is very interesting. Actually, this guy was leaning against a car and he took a photograph of him and he transposes him into this beautiful swimming pool and uses masking tape to mask off the back to get those very clipped, clear rectangles in the painting.
And I think we should mention how historically it is the naked woman who is the primary subject of figure studies, of the body, but here he eroticizes the male body, and this is very much part of this journey, this courageous embrace of the male figure as the subject, and this honesty really about his desire for the male form.
When we look at Hockney, we are stepping into a male world, which is quite unusual in paintings, as you say. So Portrait of an Artist, Pool with Two Figures, is again Hockney looking at this idea of a certain kind of life, a privilege, a freedom, sunshine. This actually isn't California. This is based on a house near Saint-Tropez in the south of France. And we have these two figures, somebody in the pool doing breaststroke, and Schlesinger, Hockney's former partner, looking, I always think, very tentatively, fully clothed over the edge of this pool, as if he doesn't quite belong there.
He's rather removed from our gaze and Hockney's gaze. There's a psychological tension that's established between the observer, clothed, standing by the edge of the pool, and this rather anonymous swimmer who is also rather distanced from us, deep in the body of the pool. And then behind we have this rich kind of Mediterranean saturated series of greens in this landscape. It's got this very strong light, you know, you get that sense of heat and warmth, but at the same time there's a feeling of anxiety in the painting, I think.
I think it reminds us, it puts us in touch with the paintings of landscape, the immersion into landscape, Californian and Yorkshire landscape, that Hockney goes into in the 1980s. There's a real passion and love of what's growing behind this swimming pool, and he clearly has a great love of landscape painting.
Hockney all the time is thinking about the history of representation, of making paintings, which he then begins to deconstruct. But here, this is a period in the 1970s of this affiliation to naturalism. But in that process, he is still able to invest the painting with a sense of drama, of narrative, of characterization and relationships.
It is fascinating because this is ostensibly rather a beautiful luxury painting. Nobody works, everybody is good to look at, the landscape is beautiful, the lifestyle is wonderful, but there's a sense in this one particularly of unease, which I do like. I like that.
Well, let's compare it to Mr. and Mrs. Ozzie Clarke in this room here, largely of double portraits. And this, again, is an infamous, a sort of notorious painting for its complexity in some respects. You know, Hockney was a great friend of Ozzie Clarke and Celia Birtwell, and they were really a sort of power couple of 60s swinging London. And here they're represented as a married couple. I'm always drawn to Ozzie's foot here in the shag pile carpet. It indicates ease, doesn't it? And domestic contentment, the white cat sitting in his lap, the lights coming through this stucco balcony in Notting Hill. It's almost Renaissance in that depiction of the married couple and of an underlying sense of ease and stability in the world.
Okay, they're just about to get divorced when this painting is made. So as soon as you have information, you look at a painting differently, don't you? I totally agree. I think this is a beautiful, fabulous painting, and it's a snapshot of a moment. It's the mid-60s, it's Notting Hill, it's West London, it's Chelsea, it's Carnaby Street. We have a fashion designer and a fabric designer who get together and, as you say, make a kind of power couple. Again, a nod to Gainsborough, Mr. and Mrs. Andrews, the Arnolfini marriage, but with a seated male and a standing female. And you talked about Renaissance paintings, and we have white lilies, which represent purity. So he's having, you know, he's making those connections in a very gentle way. But I think the way you're drawn into the space with that diagonal leg is a very clever bit of painting.
What you find in these double portraits is the way in which an equilibrium is established formally between the two figures. They don't have to mirror each other, but rather they suggest a polarity in the painting, a duality at the heart of any relationship. And he's drawn to that as a subject, and he expresses it very beautifully. And we also are asked to engage with all the detail, the picture on the left, the yellow book on the table, even that outdated old sort of Formica telephone. It's beautifully observed. There's a tenderness in the picture that arises, I think, out of his closeness to them as friends within his own life.
It's quite interesting to note that a lot of these objects have now come round again. They're very fashionable in a retro way. These deep shag pile carpets, this kind of minimal look, the caftan she's wearing, even the telephone. These things have again become fashionable. And you know, that look back at the King's Road in London 1960s. So it remains a fascinating painting.
And finally, I think, you know, we always come back to this sort of question about why Hockney strikes a chord. Why is he so popular? Why do people enjoy looking at his pictures? And I think he's able to weave his own personal story, his own biography, into the life of the pictures. There is a genuinely emotional quality to the work, a connection. It's as if we're looking at the progress of his life and the development of him as an artist through this experience of looking at the world and trying to kind of interpret it artistically.